All right, painting small and how that helped me. First off, I'm just going to be completely honest and say that I didn't always like painting small. I actually struggled with it a whole lot. When I first started oil painting, I would paint bigger paintings. I never did paint small. But then the time came where I wanted to learn how to plein air paint, and I saw all of these other artists going out there with these little panels. I was like, oh, well, that's what I have to do. And so I got my panels, I go out there, I paint, and my paintings turned out absolutely horrible. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I can paint this landscape. Like, if I took a photo and went back and painted it in my studio, I could paint it, but I'm going out here in these little panels and it's horrible. My paint's getting all messy. It's like I've never painted before. And it was very frustrating. So I kind of stayed cleared of that. And a lot of times when I go out and plein air paint, I felt that I needed a bigger panel, and I kind of lied to myself, and I was just saying like, oh, maybe this isn't just how I work. Maybe I, just the way I do it, I need more space to kind of figure out the painting as I'm doing it. And I'm just an artist that likes to do bigger paintings. It wasn't until I understood how to go about painting a smaller painting and the value of it that I saw my landscapes just really jump up in quality. And also just painting in general became easier. There's certain times in your painting life that you learn something or something clicks and it just kind of bumps you up a little bit and you're like, oh, like I remember that was a cool little bump up when I kind of figured that out. This is like one of those things. So what did I do to be able to paint these small paintings? Like, what did I do to make it all click? The best thing that I did was I learned to simplify a scene. Now, how did I do that? Well, the first just physical thing that I did is I would squint my eyes a lot. I'm always squinting my eyes and just getting rid of the detail and seeing the big shapes. Trust me, that is what matters most. That is why I can paint this tiny little itty bitty painting and it still read and look interesting. Yet you got that big painting with all that detail that you put in the closet and hide because you're embarrassed of it. Trust me, I know, I've been there. But let me kind of show you what I'm talking about. I got the photo here and I've put it into Photoshop, and I've actually put a filter on it that's going to blur it and get rid of the detail. And I'm just going to outline it here and show you, like, this is how I'm thinking. Like, I'm just breaking it down and trying to see the big shapes. On a side note, if you can afford it, I highly recommend getting Photoshop. It is very helpful. These painting filters are helpful. The paint tool, like you can select the color and find what color it is. There's just like a lot of things that you can do. You can do easy mock-ups of paintings in here. Like you can put your photo in and kind of adjust it and do things and kind of see how it would look. So if you can afford it, I think it's a very valuable tool to use as a painter. Okay, so when I'm thinking about the painting like this, I'm just going to jump in and just start painting these big shapes. I'm going to use a big brush because the saying is little painting, big brush. Where does that come from? I have no idea. I heard it somewhere and it just makes a lot of sense, so I repeat it. And I'm going to start with my darks first because I like working the dark to light, and I just find that it's a lot easier to lighten paint opposed to darken it. So I'm going to go through the painting and identify all the different darks and shadows that I see. Then after that, I'm going to do the same thing but with the lights. From there, it's just a matter of adjusting, dialing things in, pushing, pulling, doing whatever I feel like needs to be done to get the painting to where I want it. All right, so there are a lot of benefits of painting small. And one of them is that you can use these as like a test run for, figuring out a composition or practicing the values before you jump to a bigger painting. I always do these little sketches or little studies before doing a big painting because I want to work out all of my problems when I'm dealing with a canvas that's this big opposed to a big 38 by 40 whatever. Now, another benefit of doing these small paintings is it's giving you great practice. It's giving you great practice in seeing the big shapes, identifying the big shapes. It's also not taking you a lot of time, which is very valuable. I'm always talking about the importance of reps. Now, I've always recommended in the past for beginners in terms of practice and in getting better and seeing improvement, I recommend working on paintings that are only going to take 1 to 3 sittings max. Because if you have like a big painting that's taking you weeks, you're only dealing with the problems that one painting is presenting. Every painting is going to present you different problems. So the more paintings that you can get through from beginning to end, the more you're going to learn. And also, like, if you're painting a big painting and it's just not going well, you're going to be less motivated to paint, because it's going to be time for you to start painting. You're going to look over at this painting that you don't think is going well, and of course you're not going to want to sit down and paint. And losing motivation to paint is the worst thing that can happen. We need to avert that at all costs. Like, whatever you have to do to paint as much as you can, you need to do. And painting these small little paintings are great. Another benefit of these tiny little paintings is that if you paint plein air, or you want to paint in plein air, this is the best thing that you can be doing. Because when you go out and paint in plein air, it's very helpful to paint on a smaller canvas because you don't have that much time. You know, light is moving, the wind is blowing. It's just hard to paint while you're out there. And having less canvas to cover is very important. Also, since you don't have time, just being able to see what is important and capture what is important. Even if it's just color notes, like, you don't need a big canvas to go out there and do a study and gather information, gather color notes, gather like the feeling that you have out there. You don't need a big canvas for that, and a big canvas can actually get in the way and slow you down. So if you want to paint plein air, you know, in the future, you know, practicing these small studies, very, very helpful. And the last positive thing that I'll mention is that it gives you practice using thick paint. It's hard not to use thick paint when you're painting on something this small, and painting with thick paint is very important. I've actually just made a video on painting with thick paint. I'll put a link to that above if you haven't watched that one. I just find painting with thick paint is actually easier. It's easier to move and manipulate thick paint when it's on the canvas opposed to thin paint. I just think it looks better. And I feel a lot of beginners are very timid of thick paint. They're scared, you know, they feel like they can't control oil paint as it is, and just piling on more paint is just going to make it even more difficult. Trust me, once you get the hang of it, you will love it. And I actually push the paint so thick in these little studies that I use a palette knife at the end. Like, I use a palette knife and put that thick paint on there like it's icing. And just because you put it on with a palette knife doesn't mean that you can't go and push it around and move it. I do that. Like, I put it on with a palette knife, then I'll get my brush and I'll kind of move it around to where I want it. The thing is when you put on that thick paint with a palette knife, it pushes it to a value that you can't get with just using a brush. It like bumps it up to this extra level, which is a great tool for you to use to create certain effects in your painting. All right, so let's bump up the size a little bit. It's a 6x8, still very small, but a little bit bigger that we can put in a little more detail. So what I do first is I like to start with my darks. So I go through the painting, find all my shadows and all my darks, and I get those in. After that, I do the same thing with the lights. I actually start with the darkest light value, if that makes sense. So I give myself a little room to get a little bit lighter. You know, I'm working dark to light, so even though I'm going to the lights, I want to start with the darkest of the lights and then get lighter from there. Is any of this making sense? After that, it's about just dialing things in, making adjustments here, pushing this there, whatever I feel like I need to do to make the painting work. So now, did I put in every single detail that I saw in the photo? Absolutely not. No, I got the main idea of the scene, which I find a lot more difficult to pull off than detail. It helped me realize what is most important in a painting. And that's the big picture, the big shapes, the big values. What is the bare minimum that I need to make this work? Let me get that first so I know the painting's gonna work, and then I can start adding whatever details I want on top of that. And if I can't get a painting to work in a small little study, it's not going to get any better when I blow it up to a bigger canvas. The problems that I have in this little canvas are just going to be magnified onto a bigger canvas. Okay, if you like this video, if you like the channel, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow, helps me produce better videos for you so you can learn. If you're looking for painting video tutorials, I do have those, but they're on my Patreon page, which I'll put a link to in the description below. Also down there, I'll put a link to where you can sign up for the Paint Coach newsletter, because I am actually in the process of building a Foundations of Oil Painting course. A course with demonstrations, lectures, paint-alongs, exercises. It's everything that I feel like a beginner oil painter should know. So if you don't want to miss out for when I release that, sign up for the Paint Coach newsletter. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting. And you're still here. That must mean you really like this video. May I suggest then hitting that subscribe button. Also, you'll probably like this video as well.